Aliens, Earth changes, the strange, and the impossible. Forbidden Realms dives into the mysteries they don't want you to see. Buckle up. Here's Gary.
Well, here it is. We made it to a Friday, and I can't believe it. I hope everybody is having a good one. You know, today, JC, in the news, our vice president basically says that he doesn't believe we're being visited by ET aliens, that he feels they're, well, you know what they are, spirits and evil type stuff.
Yeah, I seen that. He believes, well, I won't say the word, who knows, but yeah.
How about demons? Demons.
That's the word he used. Yes, you said it, not me. But yeah, that's what he believes. But listen, the Pentagon came out with a kind of similar response about a month ago. So I don't know.
Yeah. And can you double check and see if we're even on? Because
we just it's a little delayed, I guess you could say. But
we have a lot of delays tonight. But, you know, I want to take a second here. You know, when I grew up back in 1952, the year they invented the rubber wheel, you know, when I got a little bit older, my dad was into, you know, sci-fi movies on TV on Friday and Saturday nights, like late in the night with our little, like, 6-inch round picture TV tube. And, you know, when I got older, you know, I got attached to watching those too. And if you really think about how many people in my generation, your generation, really watched a lot of sci-fi movies. And I think that a lot of people have been brainwashed through the years about this. You have all those old B movies, right? And then you have Star Wars, Star Trek, and a whole bunch of other things in between. Do you think that is really clouding up ufology?
Oh, I think it's not only clouding up ufology, but it's clouding up a lot of different fields for sure. And I think it always has been. And I think it directs the narrative and the paradigm of what's to come. And yeah, definitely, I have to agree with you on that one.
Yeah. Well, you know, I can't even get on with my computer, my telling me that I'm on live. That is weird. So you're saying we're actually live?
Oh, yeah. I'm in chat now. Yeah. We're good to go. We're rolling.
Yeah, I can't even get on chat tonight. That's unusual here. Well, tonight, our guest, Thomas Jane, is going to be talking what it's like to be a movie star, TV star, and his feelings about, well, UFOs in the movies and his feelings in ufology and all that. So what do you say about that one, JC?
Oh, man, I'm looking forward to it. I'm always thrilled when we have Thomas on. He's a great guest, great info, and very entertaining, I got to say.
Oh, yeah. Let's find some information out.
Yeah.
Thomas Jane is an actor, director, and producer, working as a popcorn action salesman for over 20 years. He's a triple Golden Globe nominee for the comedy series Hung, and has starred in such classic genre films as The Mist, Deep Blue Sea, and The Punisher. He directed and starred in the hit sci-fi series The Expanse. Jane won critical acclaim for his role as New York Yankee baseball legend Mickey Mantle in HBO's 61. His credits include Boogie Nights and Stephen King's 1922. Thomas Jane's production company, Renegade Entertainment, has been prolific since launching in late 2019. Thomas Jane recently completed his nonfiction book, A Human's Guide to Visiting Aliens, a combination of cutting-edge scientific insight, exo-speculation, and an incisive, unflinching review of the human condition makes A Human's Guide indispensable for ufologists, futurists, humanists, anyone with a keen interest in the human animal, and where we may or may not be destined as individuals, as a society, and as a species.
Well, we're back. And you know, JC, I just figured out what happened is that it's defaulting to the last show. So I kept looking about, seeing if it's on. And guess what? It's still saying our last guest. So I got to fix that after the show.
Wonder why? Yeah, that's strange. It's doing that because I'm looking at it. It doesn't. Oh, yeah, it does on the bio. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah,
but the cover looks good. I mean, the words on the below the banner is good. That's weird.
Yeah, I don't know what is going on. Well, Thomas, how are you doing, my friend? It's been a long time since you've been on. Have you been staying out of trouble?
I am so happy to be here, Gary. Tonight, the movie star doesn't have a camera. So I don't know what's going on with my computer, but it's going to have to be like those old time late night radio shows.
Yeah.
So that's what we're going to do.
That's exactly what we're going to do here tonight because, again, now I get stuck being on the whole camera the whole time.
That's right. My co-star gets all the close-ups tonight.
Oh, yeah. Well, I'm at the age I really don't like being on the camera anymore.
Yeah, I don't either. I've never liked it. I've always been really shy. The hardest thing for me about acting was, dealing with all the people. I'm what they call an introvert. I'd have been a much better writer than or anybody behind the camera than in front of it. Let me tell you, it's really the obstacle that I've had in my career is an introvert's energy is recharged when they're alone, and it's very draining when you're around others. And with a movie set, you can quadruple that. It's concentrated. And everybody's focusing on the same thing. And obviously, you're in the spotlight. So for me, that's always been really tough. This took me a long time to figure out how to deal with that.
Well, when I was in junior high school, you had in certain classes, you had to, do your book reports to the class. And I would freeze up. I was scared to be in front of the class, even, doing it.
Okay.
And when I went to broadcast training to become a DJ, which I never did, I became a talk show host instead. That getting behind the microphone is no problem. Being behind a camera doesn't bother me. But I took a job right after I graduated out of the school for a TV station. I think it was in Fairbanks, Alaska, doing the weather. And you know what? I lasted one day. They fired me because I got behind the camera and I just froze. I just totally froze.
I know the feeling, I got to tell you. And I've never really had to do public speaking, thank God, until I got into the UFO stuff. And now Contact in the Desert has been inviting me. So I put these presentations together, and I love doing it. I love writing them, and I come up with imagery that excites me, and I get a great response from the crowd that shows up. And we always have a great conversation after, but during, oh my God, Gary, it's like being a moth pinned to a light bulb for 90 minutes. It's really tough. And I wrote my stuff. I write it down, and put it on a computer. So I kind of deliver a speech, and I'm an actor, so I can read something and bring it to life and make it exciting. And I always, write jokes and try to keep it entertaining. But it's kind of like purgatory. It's sort of like death for me to be up there talking to the people. So this feels great. I actually feel more at home now that I'm just sort of, talking into a microphone. I'm digging this. I can loosen up a little.
Well, the same with me, because now we got picked up by a couple of radio stations starting next week, major ones. And, we're on all the apps. And on Tuesday to Thursday, I'm not on camera. I just do, the main apps.
Oh,
and it's so much more relaxing. I can come in here in my underwear if I wanted to, drinking a Coors beer and do the show, and no one knows.
It's one of the great jobs. I'm so happy it hasn't gone away. And we still have people like you, Gary, that are behind the microphone, great voice, entertaining, intelligent conversation, and that's just something that as long as we stay human and we don't, turn into, what do they call them? Transhumanists, then I think that there'll always be a place for this kind of thing.
Oh, I think so. Now, today, did you catch the news? Our vice president basically says, I don't believe in aliens. I don't believe in UFOs. He said, I think they're demons.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, I've heard him say stuff like that in the past. Yes, I have, where he talks about the more angelic. You know, there's a guy named Tucker Carlson who's a sort of a commentator. People either love him or hate him, but he feels the same. There's a strong pulse of biblical revelation hidden and within the alien UFO phenomenon. And you know, that's a big part of our culture. It's a big part of society. It's how a large swath of humanity interprets the world. So why wouldn't they interpret UFOs and aliens through the same lens, right?
Well, you know, I have to look at this as a halfway intelligent person has a little college behind him. And again, I had 2 years of psychology at the University of Washington.
Wow.
And that's years ago. But here's the thing. Human mind, a lot of people, I'm going to correct this, a lot of people, like on cryptics, like on Bigfoot or UFOs, they get frustrated after a while. So then they start saying, well, it's interdimensional, it's this or that, or they're this, and that because they're frustrated. But you have to realize we can't be the only campers in the campground.
Well, I got a theory about this interdimensional or even the time travel hypothesis for visiting aliens. I have a theory about why people tend to lean in that direction. Do you want to hear it?
I do.
So if we're dealing with humanoid intelligences from civilizations that are presumably much older, at least you can say that they figured stuff out that we haven't. They have control over physical reality in ways that we can't even imagine. They're completely outside the box of the worldviews, whether that's religion or science. And if that's true, then you're essentially dealing with a master. You're dealing with, in one form or another, a race of beings that have sovereignty over humanity. And it's easier to then, if you put them into the interdimensional category, you basically change the game, and you say, well, we're playing basketball and they're playing chess, so it's two totally different worlds, you know. So it takes the sovereignty off the table. And if you do the time traveler hypothesis, then you're looking at essentially an older human race. And you can say, well, they're humans and they've come back to check us out, so we're actually the same in that regard. But if they're actual intelligent humanoid beings from other planets that know stuff that we don't know, that could control physical reality in ways that we can't, that subverts our sovereignty here on Earth. Sovereignty is the reign. Humans reign. We rule the roost and make the rules because we're the smartest, most intelligent, most capable creatures on the planet. Everything bows down to our will except for God or angels. So that's my theory on that.
Well, again, a lot of people just, how can I say this? If you look at the pyramids, if you look at the Maya civilization, the Incas and all that, why did they have pyramids all over the world?
Right. All over the world.
Yeah.
And the Chinese, they won't even let people touch their pyramids. They're covered in grass. And they won't even let people study them. They won't let anywhere near them. They won't even admit their pyramids in a lot of cases. They have dozens of pyramids in China that we don't even know anything about.
But if you really think about going even farther back, when, Cain and Abel, and at that point, think about how civilization was and functioned. They believed in the fire god, the water god, this god, that god, the god of the mountain,
Right.
And the only way they could actually think that, because something had to really influence them. And then you think about like the Mayas, the Incas, and the Egyptians, and all the stuff they created so similar. That happened all around the world. They didn't have internet.
Yeah, that connection between different ancient civilizations is something that's really only come to light recently, where we're starting to have to sort of deal with the fact that somehow these folks were communicating. I mean, there's I guess it's sort of a rock shelf in Australia, and there is, on that shelf is Egyptian hieroglyphs, not just a few, a lot of them, and they tell a story. And those hieroglyphs, people have tried to debunk them and say that they were a more recent creation, but it looks like those hieroglyphs are thousands of years old, and they're in Australia. And then you get into the Grand Canyon, and that crazy story about that gentleman back in the 1920s who found this cave full of sort of proto-hieroglyphic stuff, and then the Smithsonian swept in there, shut that thing down. You can't even fly over that area now. If you walk in, the helicopters will come and get you. What the heck are they hiding? What's that one is a bit mysterious to me. You know, I can understand hiding the beings that are smarter than us and can control our reality if they wanted to, and they have mind control, and they can be invisible, and they could be sitting in the room with you right now, Gary, and we'd never know it, observing humanity. But this ancient civilization thing, what do you think about that? Why is that so difficult for us to wrap our minds around?
Because I don't think we want to come up with the idea that maybe there was an advanced civilization, more advanced than we are right now. Think about the technology to make the pyramids. Even the Sphinx, which now they discovered is way older than they ever thought it was.
Oh, Robert Schoch. Oh, is there new information about that? Because I know the Schoch's been talking about that for a long time, and some other guys about the weathering on the Sphinx. Now they think it might be 30,000 years old. Is there something new about that?
Well, they came to the conclusion that they think the Sphinx was under the ocean at one point. And that's where the wear marks and where it was created from the ocean.
Thousands of years of weathering.
Yeah. But
interesting.
But again, we didn't have the technology. Men weren't smart enough to even take and build the pyramids.
Right.
Thomas, just think about how they had to cut those blocks more accurate than we can cut today. Years ago, there was a company in Kent, Washington called Flow Industries. Yeah. They're the ones who invented high pressure accuracy in cutting, cement and blocks. Right.
And I use water.
Yeah. Right. High pressure water, very accurate. And I talked to them back a few years ago. And I said, can you actually be as accurate as the blocks it was created to do the pyramids? And they said, no, we don't have that technology yet to be that accurate.
You mean in the placement of the blocks?
No, cutting the blocks
themselves were so accurate. Are they? I know that some of the granite inside the pyramid is incredibly accurate, and we're just discovering how accurate now. And that wonderful work that's being done on the vases. Have you listened to that? All this amazing metrometry, what do they call that? The measurement stuff, where they're starting to get lasers, and they are now discovering the extreme precision with which some of these vases are made, would challenge the capabilities that we have today, and in some ways even surpass it. And these are vases. These are just, sort of stuff you put on a shelf or maybe fill up with water. And they're the most accurate things. And they've also got all this wonderful geometry, sacred geometry hidden inside them. I mean, whoever made these things were not fooling around, and nobody's fool. So yeah, I can see how that would be challenging. But it seems like, okay, it seems like if I were an archaeologist, that would be the most fascinating thing in my career, to make a discovery like that and to start burrowing in to who these people were. Why are they making vases with the precision of aerospace machinery, and what they were up to? How did they get all that wonderful knowledge? Where did it come from?
Well, somebody had the technology and trained them. That's how they and teach them how to do it. The same way you think about these blocks to build the pyramids.
Mm-hmm.
You're talking 20, 30 miles. They had to be drug. Now,
oh yeah, some cases longer than that. I mean, they were dragging them hundreds of miles, and special stone. What do you think of this? This just kind of came to me recently. I forget where, but the purpose of the pyramid, the idea that it was a power plant of some kind, I always had a little trouble with that. What are they powering? But I'm not saying that that's impossible. But I heard that sarcophagus that sits inside the Great Pyramid, if you laid down in there, the idea was, somebody came up with this theory that the energy that was created by the pyramid, the vibration, the tone, would induce an out-of-body experience where your consciousness would be sort of beamed out, using the power of the pyramid, beamed out of your body, where then you could, using your consciousness, go anywhere in the universe, which is what people who study things like Bob Monroe's Institute, his out-of-body stuff, hemisync and stuff like that. I mean, people have been claiming that they could go out of body for thousands of years. Now, that kind of stuff is sort of coming to light. And I think, what if the pyramid, what if the priests had whoever helped them build this thing, but what if their goal was to beam their consciousness out of the pyramid to then join a kind of cosmological community of other out-of-body beings and share in the glory of the universe? I mean, God knows what the hell they're doing, but it seems like you could do a lot and see a lot, and join a kind of community. And that's fascinating to me. And I think that these aliens, the really advanced ones, have the ability to bilocate with their consciousness. They can be in their body, but they can also, part of their consciousness can leave the body. And then, like remote viewing is like the dial-up modem of alien technology.
Well, again, when you really think about alien technology, I think it's so far advanced that even we that talk about it all the time, like on the show, can't really comprehend how far advanced they are.
Yeah, right. No, they're way outside of our paradigms. So anything that's outside it's just noise and black, because we don't have a structure to fit it within. That's what was keeping me writing my book, is trying to push the boundaries of what we know so that we can maybe get a pinhole of light into what is outside of those boundaries and what an alien technology, what an alien society might be like.
Yeah.
What do they think about it?
That's what I would like to know. And what really frustrates me is I get so many people on the show, to be honest with you. They say that aliens, give off orbs. They love humanity. They would never hurt mankind, that they would never allow a nuclear detonation. They wouldn't do this. Right. And you know what? That's only in the people's thoughts. Right. We don't know, because look at us. Since human civilization started, what have we been doing? Killing each other.
Well, I like to flip that around.
Please do.
I think that in order to survive over really long time scales, you've got to be able to work together in a way that creates a community, and obviously in a way that we do not have. As we advance, our ethics have to advance in lockstep with our technology in order for us to survive that technology. So given that an advanced alien civilization that has the power of the universe in their fingertips, not just the civilization, but every member of that civilization has access to that kind of power, you're looking at a very different kind of civilization that is guided by ethics that we don't understand. But one of them could be the preservation of life, right? The preservation of life-giving planets must be a priority, especially for a civilization that is going to survive over cosmological timescales. So if a ethical, self-sustainable, long-term alien civilization was very interested in the preservation of biospheres, and we don't know how rare our biosphere is, but we can say that they're probably pretty rare compared to all the planets, the trillions of planets. There's probably a very small sliver that are similar to Earth. So if these jewels of the universe are so valuable, that means that an ethical advanced civilization may decide that the best humans are dead humans in order to let the biosphere do its thing and the preservation of our biosphere. Now, where is the line? Where do we cross the line? Where do we cross the line from, well, they'll figure it out, they're just a bunch of monkeys with some matches, but give them some time. Where does it cross the line to, you know what? Sorry, guys, you had a good shot, but you cocked it up. And now it's time to let someone else move in.
Well, that jumps the question. Do you think this planet has been rebooted a few times?
I think that it's far too old to have been used. And look, if we're looking at galactic civilizations over galactic timescales, of course they would map every available jewel of the universe, and they would map it, and they would use it. They would use it as a portal, as a stopover, as a gateway, as a second home. And they may also at the same time allow any indigenous population to grow and evolve. There's so many reasons. I mean, just a long-term scientific experiment. If we make it so far to forget our own deep history, studying another sapient humanoid civilization from their beginnings and watching them struggle, watching them learn, watching them evolve would be absolutely fascinating. And you're looking at a people that live so much longer than we do. So a 10,000 year experiment might not be out of the question for these folks.
And what is time? Time for us, because of our planet, because we base our time by the sun, the 24-hour cycle, the Earth rotation. But another race on another planet, maybe that is completely different. So their time is completely opposite of ours, where, a year on our time could be, years with them. Or, but here's the thing, if you really think about what is going on, is that people don't want to look at it at that view. They they're into, the ETs, the Greys, the reptoids, all these things. And again, they're just thinking what's in their mind and assuming.
We're trying to overlay our own anthropocentric bias onto something that we really just have absolutely no idea what's going on. And that for some is incredibly tantalizing. And for others, they have to put it into a box so that they can control it, if only in their mind. And that we do that with most things, most people, we have to categorize them, whether they're a friend or a foe, smart or dumb. How can we use them? How can we help them? And we do the same with aliens. My problem with all of that is the overlay of good aliens and bad aliens and all of that sort of moral dualism that we've been endowed with since the Zoroastrians, with Angra, what was his name? Angru Mate, who was the god of chaos, was where we get our word angry from. That was the devil. And then Ahura Mazda was the good guy. So we had this moral dualism that we've lived with forever. So aliens come down and we're like, well, are you angry? Are you a white hat or a black hat?
But
and the truth is that neither might be true. Our aliens might not fit into any of the boxes that we so desperately want them to fit into.
it's possible. Yeah, and I think about the old Twilight Zone series. There was a town that basically was closed off, and actually it wasn't closed off. The ETs come and took that town as an experiment to their planet. You remember that one by any chance?
I got to tell you, the Twilight Zone explores all of these concepts, and they do it in a really, really, really good way. And I tend to I haven't done it in I think about 3 or 4 years, but I used to once a year just rewatch all the Twilight Zones. They're like mini movies. They're some of the best. A lot of it's adapted from some of the best sci-fi authors. But yeah, I remember that one very well.
Sometimes I wonder if our whole solar system is in some like test tube somewhere.
Well, who was it that just said there was some kind of accountant? His last name was Wolf, and he worked in Project Blue Book. And on his deathbed, he said that he was actually present at a telepathic conversation with one of the aliens that we had in a containment center somewhere. And he said that alien telepathically communicated that something like God ran the system, but our concept of God was not what was really going on. But some sort of today we would interpret that as a kind of a complex galactic AI that's kind of running things. And then you get into simulation theory, which I don't like.
I agree. When I was a child, Thomas, my grandmother, one day, I probably was about 5 or 6, and I went up to my grandmother because she was really, I thought, intelligent. And she was. And I asked her, who is God and what is God? And she looked at me and she said, Gary, don't ever ask me that again, because we have no answers what God is. And if you sit there and you dwell on it too long, you can go crazy because there's no answer to it.
Wow. That's kind of a great answer. I love that.
It's no answer. And it's true. We don't know.
But asking the question is really important. Getting to a place in society where we have our basic needs taken care of, and then we can sort of sit back, at least from time to time, and instead of zoning out on Netflix, pick up a book, or listen to a podcast, and start asking yourself these questions, because this is the first time that human civilization has had the time. The 20th century. We actually created a society where people can start to ask bigger questions. And those questions will change society. It'll change the value structure of society. And I think a lot of what we're seeing, the resistance to UFOs, the cover-up, is a bid to protect the control structures that are in place that are designed to keep you distracted and to keep you from, it's the old bread and circus. And I think that they're protecting something vital, that asking these questions is imperative to human survival.
I do. And here's my frustration. Ufology has changed in the last 3-4 years, where I'm not really happy with what's going on. You know, the days of the going out and investigating. Yeah, we have MUFON that does it, but the people that really would travel across the country to investigate, interview, and try to put what happened together is pretty much gone, because we have the internet now. And what happens is people go onto the internet and do their research that way. And that is totally ludicrous, because you're getting a lot of false information.
You're getting a narrated, curated version, and people know this, so they do a little digging and they can try. But the other distraction method is flood the zone. So you just get flooded with all kinds of bullshit. And people have most people have a limited time. They have time, which is great, but that time is limited to ask these questions. So they tend to stick with, they don't get off the first page of Google. So the internet is an interesting tool to kind of point you in a direction, but then you need to go deeper yourself, and you need to dig into people who have thought about this. And, take a chance. Go to the library.
Well, that's another problem. Have you realized virtually all the big bookstores are all closed up? In the cities all across the country, people are not reading books like they used to.
Yeah, it's really depressing, People say, oh, he's writing a book, It's like everybody's got a book. Yeah, nobody's reading the darn thing. I'm writing the book for myself and for other people that are interested, and for the future. We're not just writing. The beautiful thing is I have a shelf full of books that are up to 100 years old or 50 years old or from the 70s. I guess that is 50 years old. And those books stand. They stand, and they're there. They're there for the taking. An entire person's worldview is an arm's length away, to open it up and spend the time, and you create a record. Most of this stuff has not been digitized. You don't have access to old newspapers, and there's a reason for that. There's no complete archive. I think the New York Times has archived most of their stuff, but as far as the old magazine, like if you want to figure out what people were really thinking about and get beyond the narrative, the curated narrative that the internet is so good at creating, then you have to go to the library and dig into the periodicals. That's when you find the lists of the different demonstrations that were held, and who spoke there, and what they talked about, and how many people showed up, or the essays that were written. All of that forgotten stuff will give you the pulse of civilization and what they were really thinking about. I'll just give you one example. That's the suffrage, women's liberation movement. So if you go to the textbooks, are you there?
Oh yeah.
Okay. You go into the textbooks, in the college textbooks, they will tell you that women fought for this liberation. No, the opposite was true. 95% of women did not want women's liberation. They didn't want those kind of responsibilities. They knew what they were doing. They were dragging women into the workforce. And they were actually taking away some of their freedoms. And they say, well, with women, they wanted to, women had plenty of voice in politics, and they could do and achieve. Hell, they brought about prohibition. That came from women. So they had plenty of pull, and they could organize, and they had a lot going for them. But it was actually the corporations and the industries that were pushing for this so-called, quote unquote, women's liberation. And of course, they'll sell it to you just the way they sold women cigarettes, as freedom. That's the standing face. And of course, you're not gonna show up with jackboots and say, you women are going to work. No, you're gonna make it sound like you're being liberated. That's how they got all those women to smoke. Edward Bernays called them freedom torches. torches of freedom.
Well, when it comes to women, you realize back in, I think in the late 50s, women couldn't even open up a bank account in their own name. It had to be in their husband's name.
Now, some of that stuff is just from being the transition, from the one type of society into another. And these things happen naturally. As we get smarter, as we evolve, as we learn about the world, you're like, okay, maybe my wife should have a bank account. My argument is that those evolutions happen naturally. They don't need to be fought for. It's a process of awakening. But when you witness these pushes, these grand pushes, and there's a lot of money behind it, and the narrative is changed. Now, I don't know what was going on back in the 20s, but when you go to the periodicals, I do know that the vast majority of women were not interested in women's lib, and that was a rewrite of history that has stuck, and that was before the internet. So imagine what they can do now.
Oh, yeah. We need to take about a 2-minute break, Thomas, and then we're going to be right back. And I want to ask you, when we come back, think about this. What do you think about all the podcasts out there that's using clickbait and, a whole bunch of lies when it comes to ufology and disclosure? We'll be back with Thomas Jane right after this, so don't go anywhere. We'll be right back.
Coming to you from the Night Dreams Talk Radio Network newsroom, I'm Guy Ticker with the strange news. The government has covered up UFO existence since 1890. A Tennessee congressman investigating UFOs claims the crafts appear to, quote, defy physics as we know it. Republican Tim Burchett believes, do you? I'm Guy Ticker. The strange news is brought to you by Night Dreams Talk Radio Network. Do you have a strange story? Contact us at nightdreamstalkradio.com. Here's Gary.
I am back. Again, too, when you think about it, I get really frustrated, to be honest with you. I do listen to podcasts out there, and to me, it's a lot of clickbait, a lot of lies being spread when it comes to ufology. And it's gotten really out of control, where it's really affecting people who are trying to prove, well, we're being visited. Uh-oh. Hopefully we didn't lose him. Hey, JC, let's talk for a second. Yeah, he might have took a little break there for a second.
Yeah, that's probably what he did.
You back there?
Yeah.
Okay. What I was saying, when it comes to all these podcasts out there that are using clickbait and spreading gossip lies out there, don't you feel that's damaging what real people like you and what I do and a lot of people out there trying to do is prove that we are being visited?
I can certainly put that into the category of disinformation and misinformation that's been going on for 80 years. And do you have any specifics? Do we know what they're doing lately?
Well, they're just spreading this lies. Lies. If you go on any of them and listen to them, I mean, it's just.
And are these podcasts UFO based? Are these like ufologists who have podcasts and they're spreading lies?
No, it's just people having podcasts that are into ufology, and they what they hear they put on is like it's real. They want clickbait. They want people to tune in. And not just that, TikTok is, I think, also damaging the whole ufology movement if you go on there and listen to some of this stuff.
The commercialization of knowledge is sort of a double-edged sword. People need to make money if that's what they're trying to do with their lives. So a certain amount of they're being encouraged by an algorithm that can push people in different directions, and that algorithm can be used as a means of control. But as always, we have to be discerning in what we pay attention to, what we accept and what we don't, which, which should be nothing. We should always do our due diligence. And if somebody's got something interesting to say, personally, I never listen to any of the clickbaity type stuff. I go with long form. I go with people that I trust. I'm interested in the little deeper considerations of the field. I don't. I have an ear for the latest news, and of course I'm interested, but the disclosure narrative, to my mind, is what you're doing is you're asking people who have a bomb installed under their desk that will blow up the entire building. And what you're doing is you're marching in there and asking for the code for disclosure. If you're saying, I want you to show us the bodies and the craft, and open up the deep underground bases, that's what you're doing. You're marching in there and you're saying, I want that code to that bomb you've got strapped under your desk because I want to set it off.
Well, again, I don't know if you watched some of the hearings with Congress, but I sat back, honestly. I'm going to be honest with you. I had my soda, I had my popcorn, and I had a lot of laughs because,
Right.
One of them where they had the CIA representative there, and they asked, did Roswell happen? Did we recover a crashed UFO? Did we recover an alien body? He said it never happened. But then when you go back to 1947, when that happened, why would the Army Air Force announce that they had wreckage of a UFO and then recant it like about 5 hours later?
Because it came from the top where they said, hold on, we don't know what the hell's going on. In 1947, that was a reasonable reaction. We didn't know where these things were from. We didn't know why they were here. We didn't know if the saucers, the flying saucers that people were reporting, not just in America, but all over the globe. There were over 800 reports that summer, 1947, and they came from everywhere, and they were making headlines everywhere. And we didn't know if that was the first wave of an alien invasion. So it made sense to try to cover that up and study the technology and try to learn as much as we could about what we were dealing with before, going willy-nilly and announcing to the world that aliens had landed in our backyard. So the secrecy makes sense to me at first. Then it began to harden. Then it became about technology. But the basic questions are, kind of still on the table. What does this mean for human society? What does this mean for industry? In 1961, NASA commissioned the Brookings Institute to do a report about the potential impact of extraterrestrial civilizations on ours. And they said, well, it could be incredibly destabilizing. But they weren't. People take that to mean that, people would stop going to work and they'd run down the street pulling their hair out and religion would collapse. But I think that they were talking about the power structures that control you and me, the people that paid them. They paid the Brookings Institute to come up with that report. They're not talking about people. They're talking about themselves. What is this going to do for us? And Brookings said it could be incredibly destabilizing to the power structures that control our world. And that is absolutely true.
It is. But think about this, too. If the government came out tomorrow and said, we have been visited by life from another galaxy universe.
Right.
Then
do we even know?
Then, in my mind, the first one would be okay, they came out and finally told us this, but why? I wouldn't trust the government after that, because how much have they never told us on anything?
yeah, why should they be telling us the truth now? And then what would be the purpose? What's the motive for doing that? Obviously, they would have one. The my feeling is that they don't know what's going on. They don't know, and they can't admit it. They can't go, yeah, something's visiting. We're not quite sure where it's from, and we're not quite sure why they're here, and we're not really quite sure what their capabilities are. Although we do have some ideas about these things, but we don't really know. And the other thing is, if you study this for a while, you realize, and this took me a long time to sink in, I guess. I thought when I got into this that there was, aliens, and there was they were coming from space, and it was they were gray and they had big eyes. Man, that's just one of hundreds of different types, groups, species, we don't know what to call them, races that have visited and been reported around the world over the last 100 years. It is so various, and that's just the humanoid type. And then you get into a whole other section of non-humanoid type aliens. And then you get into the non-physical aliens, or the plasmoid type that appear to be under intelligent control at the very least. And it's quickly gets so confusing and so out of hand and so world shaking that you kind of, after 15 years, I've been looking at this thing and I go away scratching my head every single day.
Well, I've been doing that since 1970, and I get more frustrated. Again, something is going on, and
don't know what it is.
I don't really know what it is, but I know we're being visited, and I do believe that we are facing something down the road. I don't know if it's going to be something great for humanity or it's going to be the cookbook, how to serve man. But, again, people are looking, I think, up the wrong tree for this information. They're not using intelligence when it comes to what is going on in ufology. It's just go on X and just read some of this stuff.
Oh boy. So do you think that there's just a flood of disinformation and flooding the zone? I mean, obviously they spend a lot of money managing the narrative, and X, it's kind of low hanging fruit. If that's where we're getting our information is from X. It's just a zone of nonsense, mostly. So what do you think? Is that what it feels like?
Well, I'll use a perfect example. 3-Eye Atlas.
Oh my God. They just won't shut up about that.
How many people really were convinced it was an alien craft, a doomsday craft? How many people? There was literally millions around the whole world.
Oh yeah. Well, people like to get excited about stuff, They like to take that kind of stuff and run with it for sure. I just was surprised at how little we actually knew about the thing, and then how little NASA was sort of, how little they released on sort of what they know. There's a good guy, he's got a YouTube thing called The Angry Astronaut. If anybody hasn't seen The Angry Astronaut, this guy does stuff on the Atlas thing. He does that 3-Eye Atlas, and he's got some really interesting takes on that. The latest, I think he thinks that they've discovered evidence that there are a bunch of tiny nuclear-powered probes around 3-Eye Atlas.
I read that. I can't buy that.
I don't either. I don't buy any of it. I don't buy any of that stuff. I don't know. I think it's very distracting, and also it's sort of stuff we can pin down. We're materialists. We like objects, and we've all of our epistemological study of the UFO has to do with the objects. That's our systems. We have sensors, and they're meant to pick up data. And that data is acquired through objects. And then when those objects start breaking in half and bilocating and flying through mountains, then our sensors basically break down. We don't know what to do with that data. So we end up ignoring it, and then we call it a mystery.
The problem is we spend so much money, this country, on things like not shoring up the grid system, not looking for asteroids and all that stuff that could slam into Earth. Look what happened this past week and last week with, asteroids, go shooting.
What is going on with that? How? I know that we have something dedicated to looking for the big ones, but what is happening with that? Like, why aren't we paying a little bit more attention? Like, everything could just go south instantaneously, and we could actually harden our grid and, start preparing for this kind of stuff. But I guess that's just human nature. We just can't. We're too busy building bombs and making money off of selling weapons than worrying about, existential threats that might come out of nowhere and destroy the planet.
I don't know, but it wouldn't cost that much money to shore up our grid system so it wouldn't go down. But yet we spend money everywhere else where we shouldn't be spending the money, and it's affecting our country. Look at what's going on. It's scary. Now, go ahead.
No, I can tell you that if this planet is a second home, and if it's been used as a gateway, a stopover, a scientific playground by multiple races over thousands of years, then my guess would be that they would have some protective measures in place to protect the planet. Maybe not to protect us, but to protect the planet. And they might divert giant asteroids. And then you say, okay, well, why did they let us blow up Nagasaki and Hiroshima? And my answer to that is because we need to learn not to do that stuff. And if we tried to set off an atom bomb and aliens stepped in, man, that would cause a lot more problems than, letting the atom bomb go off. And we have to learn these lessons the hard way. We have to grow up and, skin our knee and get out there and get into fights with the neighborhood bully. We have to do all that stuff by ourselves if we're going to develop into something worthy of meeting and working with another intelligence that's been around a lot longer than us.
Well, I was just thinking of War of the Worlds, the original one with Orson Welles. A lot of people didn't catch the beginning of that show when it aired. A lot of people were listening to Amos and Andy because it was like the #1 radio show.
Right. And that ends. Then they switch over.
Yeah,
they're in the middle of an alien invasion.
Yeah, but again, it regardless when it was, people are still naive. Because I know in my state of Washington State, there's a town called Concrete. Well, they didn't hear at the beginning of the show. They heard the middle of the show onward, and they heard of an alien invasion. What did the people do at that same time that happened? They had a power outage in Concrete, Washington.
Oh, awesome! So
the people went on the streets with their rifles, pistols, shotguns, protecting their little town against this alien invasion.
That is so good. I love that.
And
I want
then
to see a Twilight Zone episode about that.
Yeah, and that is true. And then there was a farmer who killed his whole family.
Oh, no.
Because he thought it would be more humane to kill his family than let the aliens take him.
Right.
And here's what I'm saying, Thomas, and I don't want to be rude by cutting you off, but if it happened today, so many ufologists I've had on the show said, oh, you know what, people wouldn't panic, times have changed. I disagree.
People would lose their minds. But we're talking about two different things. One is an alien invasion where everyone would absolutely lose their spaghetti and it would go everywhere and probably never recover from an from an old school alien invasion. Now, fortunately, it looks like most aliens have outgrown that style of alien invasion. They may be doing a different kind of alien invasion, and if you think about it, and if you were studying us, you'd say, well, they're kind of prepared for like coming in through the front door. Maybe we'll go in the back door. Maybe we'll take our time about it. People say, well, it's been 80 years and they haven't, invaded, so they probably won't. I think that's totally wrong. I think that just like a family vacation, longer is not necessarily better. That you could create a long-term silent invasion where the goal would be to preserve as much of the biosphere and as much of the infrastructure as you could, and you could still affect an alien invasion. And as you were saying earlier, time is different. What we consider a world war that was over in 4 years, they could take 400. And so I don't think we were thinking about that right. But back to your question, yeah, I think people would absolutely lose their minds. But presentation affects interpretation. So the way that the idea is sold to us, as any car salesman will tell you, they're selling a car and then they're selling a car. And it depends on who walks through the door. And I think that we're into a multi-decade indoctrination phase. I think that we're being indoctrinated or acculturated, or you might even say initiated into a greater cosmic community. That's what I think is going on. But that does not mean that they're necessarily our friends. I think that we're being managed. We can't be friends with an anthill or a forest. So I think that we're ontologically very different. So those kind of terms don't apply. But we could be being absorbed into a larger system, not necessarily to our benefit, but to protect that larger system.
I agree with you. But on the other side, I remember The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. And they had that button. Do you remember that button?
Weren't they building a highway?
Yeah. But I'm saying ETs could have that button and say, hey, you know what? It's time to reboot our experiment.
Absolutely. And I think it's happened. I think it's happened on this planet. It's just a planet. There's all kinds of ways to use a planet. And I think that this planet's been used in most of them. And one of them is, let's see what happens when we let a group of intelligent sapients evolve on their own with no knowledge of the greater cosmic community. Now think about that. If intelligent life is billions of years old, been around for billions of years, which I think it's, when you talk about third generation suns exploding and spreading, heavier elements around the universe, there's only been a few billion years that life as we know it could have evolved, but that's plenty of time to create a lot of intelligent civilizations. And those societies have had plenty of time to explore. And why haven't we've been around for less than a blink of an eye comparatively. Why haven't we known what kind of universe we are living in until now? Why have we been allowed? Why haven't we been born into a society that where in elementary school we were taught about the greater cosmos and life in the universe?
They don't.
Because obviously we could be. Yeah, because we don't know. But why don't we know? Why don't we know? Why haven't they come down and showed themselves from the very beginning of civilization? Why are we specifically been cut off from the greater cosmic ecology of life in the universe? Because that's not passive. That's active. That's an active decision to not let us know. I'm not saying that it's a negative. I'm asking, well, what's going on there?
Well, that is the thing. We don't know what's going on, and I wish, they would be kind of open on that. We got a couple of calls. Let's take a call and see what they have to say. Who do we have out there, caller?
This is Tom.
Hi, Tom. How are you doing tonight?
Doing well, sir. I have a question for your guest, and that is, because he's in the entertainment industry, perhaps he has some conjecture on why the majority of producers, when they're doing sci-fi and fantasy films, most of the time portray alien intelligences as malevolent and nasty.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the simplest answer is because it makes good drama, and then it also sells tickets, and we like to go for the throat, so we'll go for the lowest common denominator if it's working. An alien invasion, just sounds a lot sexier, and that sounds more entertaining than the nice aliens that came down and everybody played nice and was happy and we learned about those kind of stories are tougher to do, but they can be done. They certainly be done. Close Encounters, great example. And then the bad guy becomes the government instead of the aliens.
Good question, Tom.
Yeah.
Okay, who do we have?
Hi.
Okay, you have a question for Thomas?
Yeah. Sorry, I'm kind of nervous. I am live. Yeah, I'm a big fan.
Oh, go ahead.
No, I get nervous too.
Yeah, it was only one question that I had. It was that there's a Comic-Con that's in Puerto Rico, and since I'm a big Punisher fan of his film, and it was based on one of the first scenes that he was in Puerto Rico with his family, and
That's
also
right.
he did a short film with Hellboy. If he was going to make an appearance on the Comic-Con in Puerto Rico.
Right. Did we lose him?
Yeah, I think
Hello?
real quick here.
There he is.
Yeah,
Yeah.
go ahead.
Hello?
Yeah, go ahead.
Hi.
So I had only one question. Since I'm a big Punisher fan, because there's a Comic-Con in Puerto Rico, and Hellboy was going to make an appearance on the Comic-Con, and since Thomas Jane was in a short film of
You
the
want me to come
Punisher,
to
if
Puerto
he would
Rico?
make an appearance.
Right. You want me to come to Puerto Rico? Well, if they reach out to me and ask me, I'd certainly consider it. I liked Puerto Rico. I've shot a couple of times there. I also shot a movie with Gene Hackman and Morgan Freeman in Puerto Rico in old San Juan. And I loved it there. I stayed in this gorgeous old stone brick building in the middle of downtown old San Juan. And I just remember the rain. It had an open roof. So when it rained, the rain would come down. The courtyard was in the middle of the house. So when it rained, it'd come down, and the sound of it would put me to sleep at night. It was just wonderful memories of old San Juan. So yeah, I'm sure if they tell them to reach out to me.
Okay, that's what he needs to do. Now, you just did for Star Trek, didn't you? You were McCoy?
I had the honor of playing Doc McCoy. Yeah, it was wonderful. It was a bit like jumping onto a moving train. Those guys had a really tight-knit crew and actors that had been working together for a long time. And they were so gracious with me and made me feel at home. That's always a tough job as an actor, to jump onto a show where everything's all established and you're not there from the beginning. You're kind of jumping into the middle. And in this case, I was jumping into the end of the season. And it was emotional too, because it was the last season for that show. And I hope I'm not spoiling anything. Gee.
No, I was. It's all over the news that they've canceled it, but they canceled everything coming out for Star Trek for a while, and I don't know why. That is, so many people are Really, it's a good show.
Yeah.
But how did
That's what I heard.
how did it feel to step in, Bones' role?
It was really cool. My mom got a kick out of it because when I was a little kid, we would put on in the 70s Star Trek, which was rerunning even in the 70s. They were throwing it on, and I think it was on like every night. There are 5 days a week on one of those 3 channels at 5 o'clock. So we'd put it on and wait for my dad to come home from work. And that was kind of a ritual that we had. My mom loved Star Trek. So of course I fell in love with Star Trek as a little kid. And her favorite character was Bones.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So that was really fun. It was really neat. So my mom's going to be excited to see that when it comes out.
Yeah, I'm sorry to see that it got canceled. We got another caller. Who do we have?
Oh, you got AC here.
Well, AC, you got a question?
Yes, Thomas. On aliens of different species, I attended to be closer. I don't know what is, or they're attracted to me or whatever, but reptilians. I went to a MUFON and met a hybrid, and a friend of mine that I met there, she came up and we both witnessed her eyes going back and forth as I was speaking with her. Later, I got confirmation. And then on another issue, I had a friend that was a nurse at the hospital. When I met him, he showed me a video of 2 aliens right in his front window of his house in their craft and staring in at him. But the thing that I was really close, I got to look, is that they had the big green heads, almond heads,
sorry,
smooth.
Hang on. Can you hear me? So you
yes, I can hear you.
You witnessed a craft?
Yes, in front of the window at my friend's house that he was in front of his, and he videotaped it. He ain't gonna show nobody, but
How
it were
old
2
were you?
aliens. This was in 2015, and I'm gonna be 65. So it was.
So you're a grown man witnessing a craft outside your friend's window in the middle of the night?
In the evening, yes, because it was the lights were so bright, it was hitting the shadows of the trees and putting them against the house across the street. It was a few feet off.
What kind of neighborhood was this?
I'm in Orange County. It was up in Irvine where he lives. And
so is there other houses around, or is it sort of
yes.
empty?
Yes. It was right a couple of feet off the ground in his front yard, and we were in the kitchen. There's a dining room in the front room that's about, 25 feet maybe. And they're staring in at him, big green almond heads. Their chin came down to their solar plex. But what I wanted to say was their body was like really small, boxy shoulders, long arms, and you couldn't only see up to their thigh area, and you couldn't see their hands, but the long, thin arms. But they had little scales like reptilian. You get a lizard, and you look under the belly, and you see those little those scales. That's what they had. It was green, and these were green, but their heads, I couldn't see their necks. So this is one other, and then another one was this lady I met.
Hang on. Okay, I just gotta. So did you see this yourself, or was this just your friend?
This is my friend, but this is he recorded it, and so we reviewed it. But you blank out, you don't see.
You saw the tape, and you could see these reptilians on the tape.
Well, there were green almond heads, but they had like scales of their like a suit. I thought it was their body suit maybe, but I think it was their skin. Now, my question was, because I seen another person who took pictures, they all were different kind of reptilians. But I'm going to say, do you believe that there's hybrids of different alien mixing in with reptilians, like different? That would always be my question. Do you believe
hybrid reptilians? Is that what you mean?
Yeah, like that they're hybriding with other species of aliens.
Right.
And now, I'll let you off the air on that.
Hang on. What about the chin? What you're saying? The chin came down to
down to the solar plex area, so I couldn't see their neck. Every time I see aliens pictures, their necks are always showing. This one was like the Roswell like alien, as much as that would be a big green and big almond eyes. And smooth, all is smooth. And then their bodies were small, about 4 feet tall, and they were they had scales like we could get the belly of a lizard. Those little tiny scales. That's how close it was.
The chin went down to the neck, down to
the chin went down to the neck. Yeah, you know, their chin came down. It was covered up to their solar plex area.
So it's a very long chin. Like, was it
just a big head with you know, they still have the almond. They still have the chin, like all of them, but the head was so big that it covered up to the solar plex area. So it wasn't like it was like just a bigger head, like a big almond, smooth, like you see in the way they describe them.
Their heads were so big that the chin sort of ended around the solar plexus. So their head was like gigantic compared to their body. Is that what you mean?
Right. You couldn't see their neck. So I wanted to describe that to you. And then the scales on them, you could see the scales perfect. But when you lift the belly of a lizard, because I love lizards, you lift them up and it's shiny. You could see those little scales. So my mind said these got to be hybrids, or these could be a different species.
What tone of green was it?
It was like a lime green, shiny, like a pearlish color, and so it was shiny, like pearl color in it.
How strange. I've heard several different descriptions of these so-called reptiles, and I don't know what to make. Well, the first thing I would say is that when we describe an alien, we're trying to use, you know, things that we're familiar with. So, you know, just because something looks like what we would call a reptile doesn't necessarily denote, you know, a reptilian heritage, but it is a way of describing morphology. And there seems to be some class of aliens that are pretty widespread. It's a clade, a reptilian clade of aliens. And whether or not they interbreed, I can tell you that obviously the hybrid breeding program tells us that alien genetics are compatible with human genetics. And I'm starting to wonder, you know, that instead of silicon-based aliens, I'm wondering if we all share the same machinery, the same.
What about the pineal? What about the pineal gland? That seems to be reptilian based. That we have a pineal gland. They have the same. Would that be? Would you believe in that?
I don't know. I don't know about the old.
Could that be it?
What's the origin? I didn't. You're saying the pineal gland originates with reptiles?
Yeah, the pineal gland in Buddhism and all that, we have it sort of our thinking in our mind, but they also say the reptilians, that we have that reptilian mind on the pineal gland. The Buddhists believe in all that.
The reptilian brain, it's the oldest part of the brain. It's the brain stem and the sort of the deep brain. We call it the reptilian brain. I'm not sure if that's connected to the pineal gland, but there is a lot of evidence. You know, I wouldn't call it evidence, but there's data that suggests that we may be far more interrelated than our scientists are sort of, you know, willing to accept or contemplate. We just it looks like there's something that's at once far more complex and at the same time far simpler than we ever imagined.
Right, and the only reason I'm telling you this because they also have like velociraptor type faces of aliens, and I seen pictures where the lady was taking pictures in her place and showing me the pictures, and they're like dimensional style, their heads, but you can see it definitely a reptilian head. And then it went to MUFON, and they had a lady who drew what her husband drew, and he was father was in the military, and he was in the military, and she said that the Queen of England and the general, the guy's father was standing there, and the husband drew a velociraptor queen of the velociraptors with the queen and all this, and this was done at MUFON and with an interface, you know, so that's kind of a different, you know, the species I'm trying to get with.
I've got trouble wrapping my head around reptiles. I got to be honest, and I think a lot of people do. I'm not saying that they don't. Obviously, they've been reported too many times not to take it seriously.
Yes.
But boy, do I have trouble wrapping my head around all of the different reptiles that seem to be running around. And then, of course, David Icke and these guys, they think that the ancient alien control system is reptile based. Man, I don't know, but I do know that we have a natural aversion to snakes and reptiles, and then maybe that's why they tend to be less often reported than the gray or the humanesque, even the praying mantis, but nonetheless, we certainly do have a lot of reptiles out there.
Well, Thomas, when you think about it, we really don't know what they look like. Going back in the late 50s, somebody drew a picture of the first gray, and then all of a sudden years go by, everybody said, oh, that's what I saw.
Right.
Again, we're influenced because, let's think about it. When you're a little kid and you watch all these sci-fi movies,
right.
Aliens coming down, attacking Earth, the flying saucers, the beautiful women of Venus and all this stuff, right? Yeah. You get brainwashed. And here's where I get a really pet peeve is some of these people who claim that they have been abducted and seen aliens and things happen, right? They get regressed, but they don't go to a certified hypnotist. They just go to somebody, it regresses them. And all this stuff is stored in your brain, including, Star Wars, Star Trek, and all these B movies are back in your brain.
To separate all of it. And the CIA have studied all this stuff for a long time. They know the brain, and they know that a great way to hide something is to make movies about it. And then you can conflate, so if you drop, like the flying saucer, I for years thought the flying saucer was a Hollywood creation. Turns out it was the other way around, but that's a good way to hide a flying saucer. Make movies about them, make sure that you get it right. And then when people start reporting them, you're like, oh, you mean the one, did it look just like the one from Earth versus the flying saucers? And you're like, yeah, it did. And it automatically puts a stain on it. So it's a really nice way to hide stuff.
Well, myself, I had an encounter back in the early 70s of a object in the desert of New Mexico. And, I didn't believe in aliens. I have interviewed people and stuff about it at that time, but I didn't believe them. And I remember one time I was telling my friend Art Bell, because he was telling me about his encounter with his wife at the time, Lamona, about my encounter, and he was telling me about his. And, after I had that encounter, I realized there is something going on, because in the mid-70s, I don't think we had the technology, what I experienced.
Oh, no, you were seeing real stuff, of course. Yeah, you and millions of other people. There's something real. It's real. It's really here. We're really being interacted with by another intelligence. And we can't help but overlay all of this stuff that we bring to the table onto that, which makes it incredibly confusing. And I think that, Jacques Vallée goes all the way back to sort of the fairy myths and all that. And Jacques' argument was that it's one intelligence that presents itself in many guises. I think there might be some truth to that, because why wouldn't they be able to use our own mythologies as a cover story?
Well, yeah. I mean, ufology is probably the one subject that is so, how can I say it, so in turmoil that you don't know what is real and what isn't anymore.
Right. And that's the point. It really is the point. That's what we're being perturbed by. Our sense of what is real is being challenged. And there's a reason for that. I think it's because we have inured ourselves to a materialist worldview. And in so doing, we've cut ourselves off from as much as half of the real universe. And that makes us dangerous to that universe. So I think that we're being sort of, woken up. It's a process. It's definitely a process. But, you know, I wouldn't have it any other way. What a time to be alive where this mystery is in front of us, you know, where one day our kids will grow up in a world where a lot of this is known, you know, where this ground has been explored. These trails have been blazed, the roads have been paved, the buildings have been erected. You know, you'll be able to, you know, go to the museum and learn about different civilizations and their histories. That'll happen one day if we survive.
Well, it could be in another 5,000 years. They go to the museum and they're talking about our civilization.
Oh, yeah, you bet. You know, they're already doing that. They've already got, I like the idea that some of these aliens can have technology where they can replay any event in world history holographically. So all of our actions are being recorded somehow. The ancient Vedics called it the Akash, Akash, the Akash. That is the recording software of the universe. It's sort of a non-local information stream where every action in the universe is sort of captured in the fabric of the universe. And using consciousness, we can access these events. And, you know, we talked about remote viewing earlier. That's just the beginning.
I still believe time exists. I mean, in multiple layers. I think the past still exists as the current.
I see. Yeah.
So
yeah, it seems to be that it's all happening at once. You know, it's sort of all in the now, and there's access points, and we're on a timeline. And apparently, some of these beings claim that they are from the future. Other beings say that they don't like to do time travel because it gets complicated, and if you do it wrong, you can end up on a different timeline and stuff. So they don't like it, but they can do it. Wow, reality is not what we think it is, my friends.
It really isn't. And do you got another couple minutes, or I don't want to keep you past?
Yeah, go for it.
You know, I mentioned on my last show here a time slip I had. With my sons, 2 sons. And
amazing.
And it makes me wonder what time really is, because I know for a fact I slipped back 20, 30 years in the past at that time.
And was it as real as it is now?
It was
that real?
Totally real, because here's the thing. I'll tell you a little quick story. I don't know if you remember it. I'm an avid photographer besides opening my mouth and talking. And I wanted to go up to Mount Rainier and take pictures of the waterfalls up there. And my 2 sons didn't really want to go, but they went. And we were at a place called Clearview up going towards Mount Rainier. And there was a cafe on the right side of this 2-lane old road. It had a reader board out that said hamburgers, $1 with soda. And naturally, when you have 2 preteen teenage kids, oh, Dad, I'm hungry. So we pull in, and the first thing I noticed, Thomas, all the cars were old.
Wow.
Like 20 years, maybe 30 years old. And we go in there, and even then, this is, you know, the people in there were wearing clothes that were like 20, 30 years old. Like I remember when I was a little kid, what my grandma's dress looked like. And that's how the women were dressed, with the white goggy glasses. And when we walked in there, they stared at us. And then I tried not to stare at them. And we ordered the food. My kids ate it. I ate it. And I paid for it. I'm surprised they took the money. And
you're there in the restaurant and you're eating the food and you're looking around while you're eating and you're in this world.
And I felt so out of place. It was so horrible.
It was
feeling.
uncomfortable. What about the kids? How did they feel? Were they
at that age? They didn't realize what was going on.
So how did it end?
Well, we left. And here's the point. A week later, I decided I wanted to go get some more pictures of this one fantastic waterfall. So my kids said, hey, I want to go if we can stop at that place and get another hamburger. And I go, sure. So we load in the car. We're going on that road. And we go up and down on that road. I can't find it at all. And then I finally get frustrated after doing that 3 or 4 times, turning around, going back 4 or 5 miles, going forward again. I stopped at a place by a Washington State campground. It was a store. And I walked in there and I said, last week, just down the road, we stopped at a cafe. What am I doing wrong? And the lady, I remember it to this day, got bright red. And she said, that place burnt down years ago.
Oh, wow. How long ago was this, Gary?
This was probably 30 years ago.
Some of those people might be alive. You think? Because if they were, that means that somewhere, some grandma is telling a story about these strange family that came into their hamburger shop when they were working there, or they were eating a piece of pie at the counter, and everybody turned around and stared at this weird family that looked like they were from the future.
Yeah, I'm telling you, it is honest for God truth. Now, here's another kicker to this. When I was a little kid, my grandparents would stop over on a weekend over at my parents' house, and I would have to go for a ride with them. And I was like 6 or 8 years old. Well, my grandfather always liked going up to Mount Rainier. And we would actually, the more I thought about it afterwards, he would stop at that cafe to get his coffee, and I would have my soda, and then we'd turn around and go back to Seattle. And it just is so unique. What really confuses me, what happens if we would have stayed there a little bit too long?
Yeah, right.
And I wouldn't be talking to you right now.
Yeah, how did they overlap? But yeah, there's a couple of really interesting time slips. I've never talked to somebody with an actual story that happened to them. That is really cool. And you've never told me that story before. I love that story.
It's scary when I think back about it.
Yeah, gosh, I never really knew what to make of that kind of stuff. But you're telling me this story. Wow, that means it happened to you. I believe you.
Well, again, when we went up and down that road before I went into that little store, I did see off the side of the road a whole bunch of like burnt timbers and concrete and stuff like that. That's odd. Where the cafe was.
That's really odd. So you think that was sort of the overlap spot where where the two zones may have overlapped? I mean, what the heck is going on? And then what about these portals? What do you think about the idea that there's these sort of portals that have been hidden around the planet? There's supposed to be one in Iraq, and that the government kind of, has found them and keeps them sealed up, and other civilizations use them kind of like an airport. They can zip in and out. They've been set up. You walk through one side and you end up on another planet.
That is possible, but again, I think portals open and close on this planet all the time.
Yeah, I guess you're right. I mean, geez, it sounds like you just drove right into one. Incredible.
Yeah.
And how did you get out? Like,
we just left. Just left.
No, but there must be some overlap with consciousness. There's something where somehow you were guided in, but something about the observer and the fact that you're a conscious being allowed you to get in and out, whereas the shop itself was trapped in that time. Like those people, like what if one of those people got up and left? Did anyone come in and out when you were there?
No.
I guess you were actually in that time. That shop wasn't in your time. You were in that time.
I went into their time because all the cars were old cars. Like I said, all the people were wearing clothes 20, 30 years older than what was the style at the time. And all were staring at us like.
And people could come and go because you were in that world. But somehow you were not. You were there, but you also were from someone else. Kind of like putting your hand in a glove. You're in the glove, but then your hand comes out of the glove when you leave. It's
well,
really fascinating.
I can tell you the food was the best food I ever ate at that time. I can tell you that.
Yeah, because it was more natural, and it was, it didn't have all the hormones and chemicals.
Yeah, that was big. And but again, I always wonder, and I have had nightmares about that. If I would have stayed with my kids a little bit longer, I could have been trapped there.
Or could you stay? That's my question. Is like, if you were sort of the hand in glove, then you kind of couldn't stay because you had to sort of. It's like an overlap, but the seams don't blend. You kind of can move in, but then you have to kind of move out because you obviously did. You got out of there and drove back down the street. That is incredible. It kind of breaks my brain.
It does. It still does to my day. That's why I really enjoy doing the show I do, because there's a lot of things out there we can't digest. We had a former law enforcement park ranger, plus he ran a couple, areas for the U.S., Park Service. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And he mentioned about himself. He saw a portal open and close.
Oh, wow.
So, I mean, JC, am I right on that one?
Yeah, he went through one, and it was lighter on the other side. So, in other words, it was maybe 4 in the afternoon where he was, and maybe 9 in the evening on the other side through this like tunnel of trees or big brushes, and that was in Florida.
Wow. Was it in a park or just in the
national forest?
Yeah, it was a national forest in Florida.
A lot of those national forests have been sequestered off for reasons like that. Like if they find some weird stuff, they'll create a national park out of it just to keep everybody away. You can kind of wander through, but you can't sort of really live there because weird stuff like that's going on. And I think there might be something to it with the Sasquatch too. A lot of those big national forests may have been cordoned off because that's a Sasquatch zone.
Okay, here's one. If you mentioned Bigfoot again, he told us about this one, that they saw big footprints in the snow, and him and his partner, again, they were law enforcement, so they're not the regular park rangers. Right. And so they followed these big huge footprints, and they came to a stop. And then he went back and got whatever equipment he had and did some measuring. But here's the thing. He said it would have been impossible for it to backtrack. And
the amount disappeared.
Yeah.
They just kind of ended. Yeah, I've heard that a lot with these Sasquatch things. They tend to just sort of end. It just seems that there's some sort of otherworldly connection between the old Sasquatch and reality there. There's something going on with the Sasquatch.
Well, here's one last one, that there was a major car accident in one of the U.S. parks. So him and his partner, closed off the road. They put their flares out. They went back to their vehicle to radio to get an ambulance and get help. And they were on the passenger side of the vehicle. And all of a sudden, they saw a creature in the on the passenger window of the door.
Wow.
And they pulled out their guns. They were scared. And what he said it was like a monster-looking type of thing. It was horrible looking, but it wasn't there when they turned around.
Oh, interesting. Well, those guys are quick. Those little Sasquatches.
I don't know what it was.
The interesting thing about the time we live in now is that all of these stories that used to stay local, they were folklore, town folklore. They're being shared and spread, and we're starting to learn that this is far more common than we believed, because they're still relatively rare, but they happen so often that now these patterns are starting to emerge because of our new digital interconnected society. We're now able to put dots and pieces, and they're starting to merge together into this larger picture that is exciting to me, because I think it gives us a chance to dig in and figure out what's going on.
The only problem with the digital world, too, now it's so easy to fake stuff.
Yeah, but you can figure that out. You kind of have an eye for it. And then you might be fooled every now and then, but the pattern starts to emerge. We have to look at things as data points that create a pattern instead of each individual data point should be examined to try to figure out its authenticity. But as they start to spread out, they create a pattern that we're starting to see that we did not have access to before the digital time.
You're so right.
Double-edged sword, I guess.
Now, when's your book going to come out?
Well, I am determined to get at least a digital copy out before Contact. So I'm going to be at Contact, which is at the end of May. Contact in the desert. I'll be doing a talk there. If anybody's headed out, please come and check me out. And I'm determined to have at least a digital copy done. So I'm just editing the book right now. It's such a beast. The book is not a beast, but the work goes into making it short.
Yeah.
A lot easier to make a long book.
Now, before I let you go, Thomas, do you believe we're being visited?
I absolutely believe that this universe is absolutely brimming with intelligence, and that some of that intelligence is interacting and has been interacting with humankind for a long time.
Great. Hey, Thomas, anything else you want to say to the listeners before I let you go? And by the way, I want to say thank you for being my friend and coming on and all that.
I always enjoy it, Gary. So anytime you'll have me, I'm always up for a good chat. I always learn something, and it's just it feels great to talk to you. So thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
Okay, my friend, you take care and you have a great weekend, will you?
Yeah, you too.
Okay, my friend, you take care.
Bye.
And bye. Well, JC, who do we have on the show next week?
Well, next week we've got Dr. Richard Allen Miller coming back. He hasn't been on for a few years, but he's always intriguing and very entertaining, to say the least. So we've got him coming on the 31st of Tuesday. And then on the 4th, on Wednesday, we have Skyman Bob coming on, Bob Berman. He's always very educational and entertaining too, I must say. And then we have on the 2nd of April, Mr. Floyd Wills coming on. He's going to talk about ancient tech, lost tech, and all kind of strange things. Listen, there's a lot of weird stuff out there, as you know. And then rounding off the week on the 3rd, Friday, is Mr. Whitley Strieber.
And that is going to be a great show. He has a new book, I think, coming out, too, we're going to be talking about. Again, you can find us during the week, Tuesday to Thursday, on your favorite app. And then on Friday, we're here live, and we have great guests like our guest here tonight. So I hope you enjoyed Thomas Jane. He's always refreshing to bring on because he has a lot of views.
Yeah, and also, when's the best time for the people to, hype the show?
Yeah, well, the best time to hype is tomorrow. Tomorrow about 10 o'clock. Just go onto your phone, and I don't think you can do it on your computer, and then scroll, and you'll see hype, and you can hype it 3 times. The more you hype it, give us points, and more the algorithm shares it out on YouTube. And again, I want to thank everybody out there. We are growing. We're going on 522,000 subscribers on YouTube alone. Isn't that crazy?
Yeah, that's a lot. And it's still growing fast. It's starting to multiply. It's sometimes it looks like your electric meter on the side of your house, the way it goes.
Well, you know what? I look at it too, because I go onto the studio and it tells me how many people are subscribing. It's like going to a lottery and you want a whole bunch of money. You know how it just comes out, and that's what it does sometimes with the show. I mean, I can watch it and it's like 300-400 people within a couple minutes subscribed.
Yeah, you compare it to, because I could compare it to my electric bill. But yeah, it's the same thing. It's amazing. Those numbers good. You wouldn't think that would happen, but it does, and I love it.
So subscribe to our YouTube channel if you haven't. Give it a thumbs up. Please leave a comment, because our sponsors look at that. And if you're listening to us on iHeart or Speaker or Apple or any of those out there, again, especially on Spotify and Apple, give us a 5-star rating and say, hey, I like this show. One thing we don't do here is a lot of hype and a lot of lies. We don't do that. In fact, we're really fussy on the guests we bring on because there's a lot of guests we absolutely will not bring on the show.
No, we have a standard, so to speak, I guess you can say. Plus, the listeners, they expect a certain type. So, yeah. And, definitely leave a comment after the show. Go back in and do that. That's important, as you say.
Yeah. Well, till next time, everybody have a good one. I'll catch you if you listen to us on the apps on Tuesday at 9 p.m. Pacific, 12 a.m. Eastern. Everybody have a good one.
Wait a minute! Before you go, if you're listening on Apple, Spotify, or Spreaker, take 2 seconds and tap that 5-star rating.